I want to start this by talking about the first 2 years of a career. I feel like your first 2 years of your career is the most important years of your entire career, I guess you can say. The habits that you create, the way that you're coached, the environment, all is important, especially talking about your first 2 years. I want to first start by talking about the Chicago Bears and more specifically Caleb Williams. Because there's been a lot of talk around Caleb Williams, not just last year, but this offseason and going into this season. And rightfully so. Caleb Williams was the number 1 overall pick. He was touted as a generational talent. Rightfully so. What he did at Oklahoma, what he did at USC was incredible. Won a Heisman and all that. But we didn't get the season that we thought we were going to get from Caleb Williams last year. In fact, he struggled mightily last year. Now, you can say that most of that is probably due to the environment, and I do agree. But it goes back to your first 2 years, in my opinion, are the most important years of your career. The Bears organization has not always been or had the reputation of being a good organization. I'm just be real. Not saying they're a bad organization, but they haven't had the reputation of being an organization that, as a quarterback, you feel safe, you feel comfortable being in that environment. Seeing as though they do not have a 1,000 or 4,000 yard passer in the history of their team. And that was the fear. And actually, the fear that we had about Caleb Williams going to Chicago was in full bloom last year. Poor decision-making from the coaching staff, bad offensive line. It was just a cluster of mess. And because of that, I feel like this year is the most important year in Caleb Williams' career. You already got the first one out the way, and I think you can say it was a success because he, survived the first year of the NFL, but you can also say that there was everything that could go wrong for Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears did in year one. Bad coaching staff around him. Caleb Williams he didn't really learn to adapt too well. Just didn't make the playoff. Everything that could go wrong for the Chicago Bears did. Which is why, like I said, I feel like this is the most important year for Caleb Williams' career moving forward. Let me shoot the Chicago Bears some bail real quick, just really quick. A lot of the issues that we saw, and understandably so, but a lot of the issues that we saw Caleb Williams have in college, he transferred over to the NFL. Holding the ball too long, trying to make a play out of no play, and putting the team in a bad position. At times, throwing hospital balls just to try to make a play. Trying to be the best player on the field, and when you just give up on the play. A lot of the decision-making that plagued him in college was prevalent in the NFL in year one. And that kind of is why I say the first 2 years are so important, because the coaching staff, your team is supposed to coach you out of that. Not saying mute you, not saying take away what makes you great, but they're supposed to help you see the game in a different way. And I don't think the Chicago Bears did that at all last year. Now, there were flashes. The Chicago Bears, when you have a roster as good as they had, especially on the defensive side of the ball and offense, they had flashes. Caleb Williams had flashes where he looked like all of the number one overall pick that he deserved to be. But flashes don't get you notoriety as much as you think, especially when there was a lot riding on the Chicago Bears. But this is a new year. You have a new coach in Ben Johnson. You still have some incredible weapons. Look, roster-wise, and I feel like I've said this a lot throughout when I talk about certain teams and the divisional breakdowns. When you look at the Chicago Bears, they have one of the best teams in the division, let alone one of the best teams in football. Especially offensively. You're talking about DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Cole Kmet, Colson Loveland that they got from Michigan, DeAndre Swift. They have pieces, and that's just on the offensive side of the ball. And I understand completely what they did. They wanted to leave no doubt. This entire offseason, the main thing that they focused on was offensive weapons for Caleb Williams and the offensive line for Caleb Williams. And understandably so. I don't know if you've caught on, but almost every time I talk about a team, every time I talk about division, the main point is you're only as good as your quarterback. And you can only go as far as your quarterback takes you. That's one of the biggest issues that we have with this Cleveland Browns. Their quarterback, they've had one of the better teams for the last maybe 3, 4, 5 years, but they just haven't had the consistency at the quarterback position. So nobody really considers them a threat in not just the AFC South or AFC North, but a threat in the NFL, even with arguably the best defensive player in the league in Myles Garrett. When you look at the Chicago team, they had pieces last year. They just didn't have the offensive line. On top of Caleb Williams having that mindset of, I have to make a play every single time. You can't just throw this play away. That does not work. So what they did this entire offseason is focus on the offensive line and focus on the offensive weapons, giving him Colson Loveland. A lot of people were wondering why he didn't go with T.J. Warren, but is it T.J. Warren? Yeah. But still, one of the best pass-catching tight ends in the draft. Another year with Rome Odunze, another year with DJ Moore, another year with DeAndre Swift. This team has the potential to be explosive. Plus, you have Ben Johnson, who comes from that Detroit team. This team, there's a lot of expectations on this team. In fact, I will say, part because of last year, but there's more expectation this year than last year. One, because the team is better, and two, because the things that you probably expected to happen the first year did not happen the second year. Or the things that I said that all wrong. The things that you expected to happen in the first year didn't. There were people saying that Caleb Williams was going to lead this team to the playoffs and to the NFC Championship. Well, that was furthest from the truth. Now, I'm not all blaming it on Caleb Williams. I'm not all blaming it on the coaching staff that was there last year. But what I'm saying is this is a new year. And this is yet another opportunity to show. Because, again, if you look, This is one of the better teams, especially defensively, in the league. And one thing that you did not expect that we saw last year is the offense couldn't catch up with the defense. And you would think that it would be reversed with an offense as potent or with the names that they had. But this is a new year. And with this being a new year, you need to see something different. Which is why I say that the first 2 years of a career is the most important. Because there's a lot of things that Caleb Williams has to unlearn. There's a lot of, and this is a good team. But if you don't unlearn these things, it doesn't matter who's around you. It's not going to work. And that also goes for the coaching staff. They believe Ben Johnson's the guy to do it. And I'm also talking like this because a lot of the reports that we heard have been up and down this offseason for Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears, as far as he hasn't had the greatest, or let me say, he hasn't had the most consistent training camp. That could be because they're throwing a lot at him because they want to see what he can handle. But there gets to a point where you have to pedal to the metal. You know what I mean? And the reason why I said that the NFC North can arguably be the best division in football is because if you look at every single team, and we'll talk about every single team, obviously, but if you look at every single team, you can make a case for that team being the best team in the division. And if everything works out the way that it should, if Caleb Williams looks all of the number one overall pick that he was a year ago, if he's able to get to the weapons that they have for him, I would not be shocked if the Chicago Bears team with Ben Johnson leads the division. They have the pieces to do it. It's just, are they going to be able to connect them? Are they going to be able to do what they're supposed to do? And I think we have to wonder what happens if that does not happen. Which is why I said these next two, or the first 2 years, are the most important. What happens if this year looks a lot similar to last year? I'm not saying that you can't change, but at some point you start to get set in your ways if you're Caleb Williams. Year 3, you're essentially a vet in the league. When you talk about statistics and how long people's careers are, you're essentially a vet. And to come out of college with the Heisman and just the incredible, illustrious career that you had, to essentially not get anything, and a very, very different viewpoint. There are similarities to the way that we talk about Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud when we talk about Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels. We're going to talk about Jaden Daniels next episode, but obviously there's a much wider gap when we talk about, at least right now, when we talk about Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud. But Jaden Daniels had one of the best rookie seasons we've ever seen, making all the way to the NFC Championship. First rookie quarterback to ever do that. Caleb Williams struggled mightily. What happens if that happens again? Not saying Jaden Daniels makes it to the NFC Championship, but what happens if Caleb Williams struggles? What happens if this coaching staff just isn't the one for him again? That's yet another year of your career. I'm not going to say wasted, but no growth, no development. I don't think that's going to happen because what Ben Johnson did in Detroit was really good. And, I think that was a good pickup. But we'll see. But again, I think that, and I'll probably say this 3 more times, but I think that the Chicago Bears, when you look at the roster, when you look at the team, when you look at the coaching staff, I think they have a chance to be one of, if not the best teams in the NFC North. But like the common theme that we've heard and like the common theme in the NFL, a lot of it rests on the shoulders of the quarterback. And we'll see if they have one of the best ones. Oh, man, you stayed to the end of the video. I appreciate you. If you like what you saw, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss any content from your boy. You can also go back and watch past episodes, past clips, and don't forget that the Unpopular Podcast, new episodes drop every Wednesday and Saturday. Appreciate you.